Okay, in this lessons, we're gonna go through and cover data sets. When building a pipeline, we need a way to identify the inputs to our computations. The input to a pipeline computation is specified using data sets as well as bound columns. What is data sets? What are data sets and bound columns? So data sets are simply collections of objects that tell the pipeline API where and how to find the inputs to computations. An example of data sets would be the US equity pricing. A bound column is a column of data that is concretely bound to a data set. So the US equity pricing will have the open, high, low, close. Instances of bound columns are dynamically created upon access to attributes of datasets. Input to pipeline computations must be of type bound column. An example of a bound column that we have already seen is the US equity pricing.close. So if you access the dataset US equity pricing and then you ask for returns on equity, that won't work because return on equity is not a bound column that is bound to the dataset of US equity pricing. It is important to understand that datasets and bound columns do not hold actual data. Remember that when computations are created and added to pipeline, they don't actually perform the computation until the pipeline is actually run. Dataset and bound columns can be thought of in a similar way. They are simply used to identify the inputs of a computation. The data is populated later when and as and when the pipeline is being run. D-types or data types. When defining pipeline computations, we need to know the types of our inputs in order to know which operations and functions we can use. Obviously, you can't perform additions and subtractions on strings. The D-types of a bound column tells a computation what the type of the data will be when the pipeline is run. For example, US equity pricing has a float D-type, so a factor may perform arithmetic operations on US equity pricing.close. Basically, for example, computing a 5-day mean. The importance of this will become more clear in the next lesson called custom factors. The D-type of a bound column can also determine the type of computation. In the case of latest computation, the D-type determines whether the computation is a factor, which is a float, or a filter, boolean, or a classifier, which is a string or integer. Pricing data. Now, US equity pricing data is stored in the US equity pricing dataset. US equity pricing provides 5 columns, the open, the high, the low, the close, as well as the volume. Each of these columns have a float D-type. Fundamental data. Morningstar fundamental datasets are namespace under the Quantopian.pipeline.data.morningstar module. The following datasets are currently available from the Morningstar module. You have your asset classification, your balance sheet, your cash flow statement, company reference, earnings ratio, earnings report, financial statement filing, general profile, income statement operation ratios, share class reference, valuation, as well as valuation ratio. Each of these datasets provides column that can be passed as inputs to pipeline, so you can actually make use of those for your computation and also for your algorithm. The D-types of the columns vary. Some are variables or floats, some are actually string, some are filters. For example, Morningstar.valuation.market cap is a column representing the most recently reported market cap for each asset on each date. There are over 900 total columns available in the Morningstar dataset. So I would suggest, encourage you to actually go to the fundamentals reference for full descriptions of each of these attributes and see how you can actually make use of it as well. Quantopian also have partner data. There are many datasets besides US equity pricing, and Morningstar fundamentals are available on Quantopian. These include corporate fundamental data, news, sentiment, macroeconomic indicators, and more. What you can see here is that they're all stored under the Quantopian.pipeline.data. You have Axon, you have Estimize, you have Event Vesta, you have Psych Signal, Quando, as well as Sendex as well. Similar to US equity pricing, each of these datasets have columns or bound columns that can be used in pipeline computations. The columns along with example algorithms and notebook can be found on the data page. The D types of the columns vary once again, so it pays to actually study them. Now, bound columns are the most commonly used in custom factors, which we will cover in the next lesson.